All right, listener. Are you ready to set sail? Because today we're diving deep into David Gran's The Wager.
Ooh, this one is a wild ride.
It really is.
Buckle up.
Yeah. The Wager, let me tell you, is more than just your average historical adventure. It's a story of shipwreck and mutiny and survival against all odds.
Yeah, and all set against the backdrop of the 18th century British Empire.
Exactly.
You know, with all of that ambition for power and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating look at a time when empires clashed and fortunes were won and lost on the high seas.
And what I think is so captivating about this particular book is how Grann throws us right into the heart of the mystery. You know, he doesn't waste any time.
No.
He presents us with all these conflicting accounts from the survivors, each one clamoring for our belief.
That's true.
And you find yourself as the reader kind of like a detective,
Yeah.
sifting through the evidence, trying to piece together what really happened on this fateful voyage.
Yeah. I felt like I was in a courtroom drama the whole time.
Yes.
But the courtroom was a sinking ship.
Right.
It was so good.
Exactly.
But before we get to the shipwreck itself,
Yeah.
Grann so skillfully sets the scene
Yes.
with the War of Jenkins' Ear.
The War of Jenkins' Ear.
It sounds most absurd, right?
It does on its face.
A war sparked by a severed ear.
Right. Like a single ear.
What?
It sounds unbelievable, but this seemingly like small minor conflict actually reveals so much about how empires operate.
It does.
You know, it was less about the ear itself,
Right.
and more about asserting dominance, about securing trade routes,
Right.
and ultimately about controlling vast swaths of the globe.
Yeah.
And Grann expertly uses this historical backdrop to highlight the stakes
Yes.
involved in the Wager's mission.
And they were high stakes.
They were very high.
Right. So we've got this volatile political climate whispers of a Spanish treasure galleon sailing around,
Oh, yeah.
laden with riches.
The prize of all the oceans.
And then enter this fascinating cast of characters.
Oh, yes.
Each one
They're so good.
seems to be carrying their own secrets and ambition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've got Commodore Anson,
Right.
this sort of seasoned seaman
Yeah.
who's tasked with leading the expedition.
He's the man.
He is the man.
Right.
But Grann hints at this certain rigidity in his character.
Yes.
This kind of strict adherence to the rules.
Right.
That makes you wonder
Yeah.
if it will actually serve him well in the face of these unpredictable circumstances.
Totally. I was wondering the same thing. Because that could be helpful or hurtful in the end.
Yeah.
And then there's Lieutenant Cheap.
Yes.
This is our central figure in this whole drama.
Driven by debt.
Yeah.
Yearning for a brighter future.
Yeah. He wants to prove himself.
Yes. This voyage is his chance.
But there's this tension in his personality.
Yes.
Right? Like this disdain for anything reckless.
Anything reckless.
Which makes you wonder if his determination will be his salvation or his downfall.
It's a great question.
Right.
And let's not forget Gunnar Bulkley.
Gunnar Bulkley. Oh, he's good.
The self-made man.
Yeah.
So skilled.
Yeah.
And he documents everything
Everything.
meticulously in his journal.
I love that.
And that journal becomes this key piece of evidence.
That's so important.
Later on.
Yeah.
Offering a glimpse into the minds of the crew.
Right.
And potentially challenging the official narrative.
It really does.
It's like having a direct line to the past.
I know. I love those primary sources.
Oh, the best.
They just add so much.
Absolutely.
And lastly, we have Midshipman Byron.
Yes.
This young nobleman who's drawn to the adventure of the sea.
Mm-hmm.
But you get the sense that he's seeking something more.
More than just glory.
Glory.
Yeah.
Maybe an escape from a troubled past.
It's a good point.
Right.
Something deeper going on there.
It's just so interesting to consider how all of these different backgrounds shape their actions as the story unfolds. You know, you start to wonder how much of their fate is determined by who they are.
Right.
And how much is shaped by the extraordinary and often brutal circumstances they face.
That's a good question.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've got these complex characters, a powder keg of a mission.
Yes.
And then Grann throws us right into the harsh realities.
The nitty-gritty.
Their reality.
Of 18th century seafaring.
Life aboard the Wager was no luxury cruise.
Not at all.
The book paints this really vivid picture of the conditions cramped and the constant threat of disease, the stench of unwashed bodies.
It's just like a melting pot of personalities,
Yeah.
many of whom were forced into service
Yes.
by those notorious press gangs.
Oh, yeah, just plucked from your life.
Can you imagine?
and thrown into this chaotic world.
Yeah, just brutal.
Yeah.
And then there's the journey itself.
Oh, my God. Rounding Cape Horn.
Even today,
Yeah.
a sailor's ultimate test.
I know.
Back then, it was brutal.
Absolutely.
Just this gauntlet of relentless storms, towering waves.
Icy cold.
You can almost feel it when you read his descriptions.
Oh, his descriptions are incredible.
They're so vivid, almost poetic,
Yeah.
and he uses them to convey the sheer power of nature.
You could almost feel that icy spray.
Yes.
And the howling wind.
And that constant fear of being swallowed by the sea.
Like just how vulnerable those sailors were.
Totally at the mercy of the elements.
And so isolated.
So isolated.
And you start to get this sense of foreboding.
Yeah.
Like something terrible is lurking just over the horizon.
Oh.
You know? It's palpable.
It is, lurking just over the horizon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that terrible thing comes in the form of a shipwreck.
Oh, yeah.
The Wager, battered and broken, runs aground on this desolate island off the coast of Patagonia.
I mean, can you imagine?
Oh, just the chaos.
Yeah.
The terror of being flung against those rocks.
Scramble for survival. And that's just the beginning of their ordeal.
It is.
Right. They're marooned now, facing dwindling supplies.
Yeah.
The reality of being stranded.
At the edge of the world.
Yeah. And the island itself, it becomes a crucible.
It does.
This test of human endurance and the limits of social order.
Absolutely.
And Grann does a brilliant job.
Oh, he's so good at this.
Of portraying how this situation just reviews the true nature of these men.
Yeah, their strengths, their weaknesses.
Yeah.
And the fault lines that will eventually erupt into mutiny.
So we have this pressure cooker of a situation.
Yes.
Right? And then into this already volatile mix.
Oh, yeah.
Enter the Questcar, the indigenous people of the region.
And this adds a whole other layer of complexity to the story.
It does.
I mean, Grann describes them as so resourceful.
Yeah.
They have this deep understanding of the land and the sea. And their culture, their way of life, is so different from that rigid hierarchical structure of the British Navy.
It's such a stark contrast.
It is.
Right.
And it makes you question.
It does.
Those assumptions of European superiority.
Yeah.
Like, here are these men.
Right.
They were sent to claim territory for the empire. And yet they're completely reliant on these very people they perceive as quote-unquote savages for their survival.
It's crazy.
It's a brilliant juxtaposition.
It is.
And it speaks volumes about the arrogance of empire.
It really does.
And it's in this pressure cooker of cultural clash and dwindling resources, simmering resentment that the seeds of mutiny are sown.
And Captain Cheap,
yes,
despite his initial determination, starts to unravel.
He does.
Under the weight of his responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right. His leadership style, which maybe was effective on a well-ordered warship, become a liability.
It does.
In this chaotic, desperate environment.
Yeah, and Grann doesn't shy away from depicting Cheap's flaws.
No, he doesn't.
He's a man haunted by his past.
Yeah.
Driven by this need to prove himself worthy of his position.
Right.
But that drive, that inflexibility, it blinds him.
It does.
To the needs of his men and ultimately pushes them to the breaking point.
Then it happens.
The mutiny.
The mutiny led by Gunner Bulkley.
Oh, Bulkley.
The men seize control of the Wager, they cast off their captain, and they attempt to forge their own path to survival.
Right, but this is where Grann really digs into the moral ambiguity of the situation.
Yeah.
Were Bulkley and his men justified in their actions?
It's a good question.
Were they heroes or were they villains?
Yeah.
And Grann doesn't provide easy answers.
He doesn't.
He forces the reader to grapple with those complexities.
Yeah.
Of loyalty and justice and the shifting sands of morality under extreme pressure.
And that's a question that lingers.
It does.
Long after you finish the book.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
And just when you think you have a handle on the situation, the story splits.
It does.
We follow these two divergent paths.
Yes.
Those who leave Wager Island in the longboat and those who remain with Cheap.
And the narrative structure here is fascinating.
It is.
Grann jumps back and forth between these two groups, each facing their own set of challenges.
Right.
So on the longboat led by Bulkley, you have this microcosm of society forming with its own rules and hierarchies and power struggles.
It's fascinating.
Isn't it?
They're battling the elements.
They are.
Dwindling supplies. and just the constant threat of internal conflict.
Yeah, and Grann doesn't romanticize their journey at all.
No, he doesn't.
He describes the cramped conditions, the gnawing hunger, the psychological toll of being adrift in this vast, unforgiving ocean.
Meanwhile, back on Wager, cheap injured, stripped of his command, he's struggling to survive.
Yes.
Both physically and emotionally. Right. He forms this unlikely alliance.
But it does.
With those who remain loyal.
Yeah.
Including midshipmen Byron and Campbell.
And their journey is just as perilous.
Oh, yeah.
If not more so.
Yeah.
I mean, they're facing treacherous terrain. Right. Freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
The constant threat of starvation.
They have to rely on the help of the Chono people.
Yes, another indigenous group.
To navigate those waters of Patagonia.
A treacherous waters of Patagonia.
And Grann's portrayal of the Chono is really interesting.
It is.
He highlights their resourcefulness.
Yeah.
Their deep connection to the land and sea. And their willingness to help these desperate, lost souls.
Yeah.
Even though they pose a threat.
They do.
To their way of life.
It's amazing.
It really is.
It's another example of how Grann challenges those colonial assumptions.
He does.
Right. He shows us that survival often depends on cooperation.
Yeah.
On recognizing the humanity.
Right.
Of those who are different from us.
It's like a beautiful thing. And he doesn't shy away from the brutal realities of their situation.
No, he does not.
There's that scene.
Oh, yeah.
Where Cheap is forced to make an impossible choice.
I know.
Abandoning those who are deemed less essential.
It's a heart-wrenching.
To the mission, it's just gut-wrenching.
It is.
Right. And it reveals the true cost of survival. How far are you willing to go?
Yeah.
What lines are you willing to cross?
When faced with the prospect of your own demise.
So we have these two groups.
Yes.
Each battling their own demons.
Your own version of hell.
Their own version of hell, yeah. And just when you think it can't get any worse.
Grann throws in another twist.
He does.
And this twist, let me tell you.
Yeah.
It's a game changer.
It is.
It completely reframes the story.
It does.
It forces us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about the Wager and the men who sailed on her.
And I'm not going to spoil it for you, listener.
Oh.
But trust me.
You got to read it.
This is where the story takes a truly dark and unexpected turn.
And to find out what happens next,
you're going to have to dive into the Wager yourself.
Yeah. Okay, listener, we're back. And as promised, we're diving into the aftermath of the Wager's disastrous voyage. And you might think after shipwreck and mutiny and hardship, the story would kind of wind down, but...
But that's where the real intrigue begins.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Because survival was just the first act.
Right.
What happens next is a battle for control of the narrative.
It's like a whole other voyage.
It is.
Back in England. Right. So these men return.
They do.
Each with their own version of events.
Battling for the ear of the Admiralty.
And the public.
And the public.
It becomes a question of who gets to tell the story.
Exactly. Whose voice will be heard.
Whose version of the truth will prevail.
And remember, this is the 18th century.
Oh, yeah.
Mutiny.
Big deal.
Is a capital offense.
Yeah.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah. Not just for the survivors,
yeah,
but for the reputation of the British Navy.
The entire British Navy. So we've got this collision of narratives.
We do.
Right. Bulkley and his men arrive first.
Hailed as heroes.
Yeah, incredible journey in the longboat.
Unbelievable.
But
then Lieutenant Baines arrives.
Dun dun dun.
Cheap's loyal officer.
Right.
And he paints a very different picture.
He does, doesn't he?
Accusing Bulkley and his men of treason.
Treason, that's a big word.
It is. Describing their actions as this blatant disregard for authority, a selfish act that put the entire mission at risk.
And then, of course, eventually Captain Cheap himself returns.
He does.
Adding fuel to the fire with his own tale of suffering and betrayal.
Can you imagine the scene?
I know.
These men, once comrades,
right,
facing unimaginable hardships together,
right,
now pitted against each other.
Fighting for their lives, essentially.
Yeah, their words shaping public opinion and ultimately determining their fate.
It's like a Shakespearean drama.
It is.
This clash of ambition and pride and the need for redemption.
And at the center of it all, this question of truth.
What really happened?
On that desolate island.
Whose account is the most reliable?
It's impossible to know for sure.
Right.
And the Admiralty, faced with this tangled web of accusations...
They have to do something.
They do. They launch a full-blown investigation.
Of course.
Culminating in this dramatic court-martial.
And the court-martial itself is fascinating.
It is.
Right, because it becomes this microcosm of the power dynamics at play.
Totally.
The Admiralty wants to preserve the image of the Navy.
Of course.
Right.
They seem less interested in uncovering the truth and more focused on maintaining order and control.
It makes you wonder, what does justice even mean in this context?
That's the question, isn't it?
Right. Is it about punishing the guilty?
Right.
Or upholding a certain narrative?
That serves those in power.
Exactly. And the outcome of the court-martial
is
surprising.
That's a shocker.
To say the least.
It is.
Won't give anything away.
No, spoil
But
please.
it reveals how easily narratives can be manipulated, how individual stories can be silenced, and how justice
can be a very subjective concept.
Especially when powerful forces are at play.
Especially then.
But even as this official narrative is being constructed, Gran reminds us that there are other stories, other perspectives.
They often get left out of the history books.
Right. He sheds light on the fate of those who are left behind.
On Wager Islands.
Those Marines who were abandoned, the men who chose to stay with Cheap.
Yeah.
And the indigenous people whose lives were forever changed by this whole encounter.
It's a good reminder that history is often written by the victors.
It is.
But it's also a testament to the power of digging deeper.
Yes.
Seeking out those hidden stories that challenge our understanding of the past.
And The Wager, in the end, is more than just a thrilling adventure tale.
It is.
It's a profound meditation on human nature.
The illusions of empire.
And the enduring power of storytelling.
Grann leaves us with this lingering sense of unease. This recognition that even in the face of overwhelming evidence, truth can be subjective and justice can be a slippery concept.
He doesn't give us any easy answers.
No.
Right? He challenges us to engage with the material.
To question our assumptions.
And consider the lasting impact of this seemingly forgotten chapter of history.
The Wager is a book that will stay with you long after you finish the last page.
It really is.
It's a reminder that history is not just dates and battles.
No.
It's this tapestry of human experiences, woven with courage and resilience and the often unforeseen consequences of our choices.
So, listener, if you're looking for a book that will challenge your perceptions, transport you to another time and place, and leave you pondering those mysteries of human nature.
The Wager, isn't it?
It is added to your reading list.
Absolutely.
And that's the beauty of these deep dives, right?
I think so.
We're not just summarizing a book.
No.
We're inviting you, the listener, to embark on your own intellectual adventure.
You're on deep dive.
So until next time, keep diving deep, keep exploring.
And keep questioning.
And who knows, maybe your next deep dive will lead you to the shores of Wager Island, where history, adventure, and the enduring power of storytelling collide.
I love it.